Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow exact orders to spite somebody. And in today's episode, it's all about people complying to spite their partners, guys. And OP tells the story about his nasty ex-Karen wife, who uses a smug lawyer to get what she wants, and it backfires so hard. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So my ex-wife was a mega Karen, not even gonna go into that. And she used to pull the BS move of getting out of the car and walking whenever there was an argument, knowing my stupid ass would follow her and try to convince her to get back in so we could go home. It didn't matter if we were on a busy street, in the parking lot, in the middle of nowhere. If she got mad at me, she was getting out and using walking home as a means to threaten me. Lovely person, right? Hence why she's my ex. Well, one night, she starts an argument after dinner. As soon as we got in the car, she accuses me of flirting with the waitress all night. Now, this waitress was the mother of one of my old high school friends. We were talking and catching up since she hadn't seen me for years, so of course we were chatting a lot. Anyhow, my friend's mom definitely wasn't on my radar of women to flirt with, and I let my ex know that in no uncertain terms. As usual, she ignores any reasoning I had, and she just jumps out of the car and starts walking. So here I go, driving next to her, window down, trying to coax her back into the car. Now on this particular evening, it was raining and cold, and I had really just had enough of this stupid habit of hers, and this was the millionth time it's happened. So I asked her twice to get in, and I told her I would drive off if she didn't. And that's when she replies, "Just effing leave, go home." I asked if she was absolutely sure, to which she responds, "Did you hear me stutter? Go effing home." Cue the malicious compliance. So I did. I drove all the way home, cracked open a cold Pepsi, grabbed my new book, and plopped my butt down in the recliner and started reading. 30 minutes later, she flings the door open, looking like a drowned rat, extremely pissed. She then starts yelling, "Where the F did you go? Why didn't you come back for me?" To which I calmly said, "Well, you told me to leave and go home. I just figured you needed some time to cool off." We got into an argument after that, and it's funny because ever since that happened, she never got out of the car again. You know, that is a lesson that needed to be taught because that would get old real quick, guys. It's like that one person in the relationship that always threatens to break up every time things don't go their way. Like you push hard enough and one day it will happen. And this person shares their comment and says, "I had an ex who tried that once. I live in the northern half of the US, and she decides to pick a fight right in the middle of driving to a lunch date with our friends. I pulled the car over as she wanted out, as she was over it. It was worse than a 5-year-old having a tantrum, so I left her on the side of the road and went to lunch. 40 minutes later, she finally shows up and she's pissed. I drove her home afterwards, and I thanked her for helping me make a decision about our future. I never heard from her again. So every once in a while, I think about this story while playing Sudoku on my phone, and it makes me smile. I realize it's the perfect malicious compliance and a bit of revenge material. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but some background is needed. A few years ago, when I was in grad school, I dated a man who was several years older than me, who had just finished his master's at the same school. He started a company based on that work. He seemed to have a chip on his shoulder about the fact that he went back to school in his late 20s, and the fact that I was in a PhD program. Honestly, I need to emphasize that I did not think I was better or smarter than him in any way, and I thought and still think that he's incredibly smart and his company does fascinating work. But he still projected this inferiority complex on me, and it was one of the many things that soured the relationship. Like, the guy was so obsessed with feeling smarter than me and bringing me down a peg. The relationship ran its course within a year, and the breakup was messy, but he insisted on remaining friends despite a lot of the obvious tension between us. One day, he asked me to help him pick up a moving truck he needed for work, and I agreed. But when I got in the car, we were kind of quiet for a couple of minutes. So I pull out my phone and I finish the Sudoku game I had up. And for some context, I'm incredibly good at Sudoku, relative to most people. This is because I obsessively solved Sudoku puzzles as a kid, and I had big books of them to solve on long bus rides to school. It's still my go-to game to play while waiting in line, pooping, etc. I don't really correlate this with intelligence. My brain's just trained to recognize the patterns, and solving them is soothing. So he looked over, and he saw I was playing, and he asked what app I was playing on. I just said that I play on a certain website I liked, and when he asked why I don't use a Sudoku app, I tried to be as neutral as possible in my response. And I said the website had a nice spread of difficulty, and that every app I tried had either been too easy or too difficult. Admittedly, it's almost always too easy, but because of aforementioned inferiority complex, I was hedging this on purpose. Hearing that, he kind of has an "oh really" response, and he insisted I try the app he has on his phone because he was sure I would find it hard, so I maliciously complied. So with that, he opens up the hardest setting of a puzzle in his app, and then hands it to me, saying even he barely could solve this, so good luck to little old me. Well, I solved it in about a minute, beating the record on his phone by a long shot. I then showed it to him, and he seemed alarmed and basically said I got lucky. So I played several more times, so that all of my times flooded his fastest times list, until all of his times were gone. His shock and frustration at this was satisfying on its own, but many months later, when I had long forgotten about it, he randomly sends me a screenshot of his puzzle in that app, with a faster time, except this was for the easiest puzzle setting. So of course, to be petty, I immediately download the app and I played on the easiest setting. I beat his time by a significant margin again, and then sent him a screenshot. Now was this mean? Maybe. Was it satisfying? Heck yes. Guys, I freaking love this malicious compliance. Like, the fact that OP's score ate at him for months and months makes it even more satisfying. Like, honestly, it must be so exhausting to compare everything one does to other people. And I'm pretty sure the guy would be so much happier in life if he learned some humility, right? So since Christmas is right around the corner, I thought I'd share this story. Once upon a time, I was a newlywed, getting ready for my first Christmas with my in-laws. Now, it's worth noting that these people are Christmas crazy. You know that one house on the block that's decked out in more bling than a cashed up stripper? That's them. So as a new bride, I wanted to make a good impression. I should also note that my new husband had a history of taking credit for things that he played no part in, such as presents, meals, or even our wedding. In the lead up to Christmas, I had shopped, wrapped, and ribboned as if my life depended on it. Everyone had carefully selected gifts that were wrapped immaculately, with a complimenting ribbon and bow and handmade tags. On Christmas morning, I was ready. We entered the living room, and everyone sat down around the tree for the gift-giving ceremony. Now, the ceremony was a big part of the day for my in-laws, and one person was selected to wear a Santa hat and distribute the gifts one by one. When it was your turn to open a gift, everyone watched you. What I didn't know is that this was a form of analysis, so it could be discussed later. A few gifts are given out, and then one of the ones I'd wrapped was handed to my husband. I was terribly excited. It was something he'd wanted for ages. I couldn't wait for him to be thrilled when he opened it. But wait, I did, because he couldn't get the ribbon off. We weren't supposed to talk during the ceremony, so we all sat there quietly while a grown man wrestled with a ribbon. It was a curling ribbon, for those in the know, not exactly a Rubik's Cube. So after a good 10 minutes of watching him lose his mind, I quietly suggested that he pull the bow off so the ribbon would slip off the side. He did so, and he was mildly enthused at the gift. We moved on to the next person, and after a bit, my husband was handed another gift. That's when my mother-in-law said, "Don't worry, I won't tell you how to open it," with a completely innocent yet smug smile on her face. I chose not to say what I was thinking. Shortly after, a gift was handed to me from my parents-in-law with an insincere apology that it didn't have a bow. At this point, I figured that I must have somehow broken ceremony etiquette by using a ribbon. I made a mental note to not repeat my mistake in the future, and I just laughed it off. First Christmas, right? There's bound to be some hiccups. Following the ceremony, it was lunchtime, which went fine. Afterwards, the men retired downstairs while the women cleaned up. This wasn't unusual as they're a fairly traditional family, except instead of helping my mother and sister-in-law with the dishes, I was sent to collect the scraps of wrapping paper from earlier and take them out to the garbage. This was a little unusual when I'd been there for meals before and I had done the dishes with them. But again, it's Christmas and they have their rules. So I collected up and went back to the kitchen to get another trash bag. I was in the hallway when I overhear their conversation saying how terrible I was at domestic things, how I'd clearly paid to have the gifts wrapped to show off, and how the things I'd picked were unsuitable and I was ungrateful for what they'd given me, etc., etc. I was steamed. Unexpectedly, my husband chimed in. He said, if I'd have known she was going to go stupid with it, I would have helped. But I was so busy working and she swore she'd take care of it. And hearing that, I went from steamed to apocalyptic. The guy was in his third week of an 8-week holiday from work, while I was working extra shifts trying to get a promotion. I had begged him to help me choose things for his family, as he clearly knows them better than I. When we got home later and I'd calmed down a bit, I tried talking to him about it. But his response was a groveling apology and then an explanation that his family were a bit crazy about Christmas and that I should just leave family gifts to him. So I complied. The following Christmas, I bought a gift for each of them. One gift, from me only, wrapped with simple paper and minimal tape. Christmas morning comes around and my husband's given the honor of the Santa hat. Halfway through, he starts looking around the tree frantically, obviously having realized that there was nothing from him under there. Afterwards, he pulls me aside and he asked, "What the F?" And I'm sure I looked way more innocent than I felt. When I answered, "I left the family gifts to you, like you said." I don't have a funny story about a third Christmas because our marriage didn't last that long. But I've just finished wrapping a light pile of gifts for this upcoming Christmas. And as I curled the ribbon to make my kids' presents extra fancy, I felt vindicated to know that this year's chaos will have zero sense of ceremony about it. Guys, I am just glad to know that OP is much happier around Christmas now. And I feel like that family was way over the top, right? And might have been on purpose picking on and criticizing OP. Like, way to take a special holiday and ruin it for someone by being a bunch of nasty people who are so over the top about presents and how they're wrapped. This person says, that sounds like an absolute horrible family to me. In my family, some people wrap gifts in beautiful paper, some wrap it in whatever they find in their closets, and some don't wrap it at all. We don't care. A gift is about the best intentions, about being together and having a good time. I'm the kind that uses leftover wrapping paper, and if I don't have enough, I use magazines to cover the holes. Of course, I purchase wrapping paper, but our rule is come as you are, do as you are. My sister Jen married right out of college, and she had 5 kids with her husband Chris over the next 8 years. He preferred that she stay home with the kids. She wanted to work, but accepted that life took her in a different direction. She cared for the house and the kids, and he worked long hours to comfortably support the family. With that said, Chris's employer held a black tie dinner annually until 2020. Chris always attended alone, insisting that Jen needs to stay home and take care of the kids. The employer resumed the black tie events last year. My nieces and nephews then ranged from 7 to 16 years old, and they could stay home by themselves for a few hours. And Jen asked me to pick up their daughter from an activity and help with dinner on the night of the event, which I said no problem to. Jen then told Chris that she had everything arranged for the kids and she was excited to go to the event. Chris said he would rather go alone because she had put on some weight and she wouldn't be able to lose it in time to look good for the formal event. He told Jen that they can go next year if she tries to get back into shape. My sister called me in tears to cancel our plans. She was shocked that Chris didn't want to be seen with her. And I want to note, I'm not shaming anyone for their weight, but Chris has to be bordering on clinically obese, and he blamed the extra weight on work stress. Meanwhile, my sister was 6 pounds overweight, according to the BMI chart, and she's a natural beauty. Chris wanted her to lose 30 to 40 pounds to look good enough in formal attire. Jen politely declined my offer to castrate Chris and asked that I didn't discuss this with our family. I reluctantly agreed, but suggested marriage counseling because nothing about that was acceptable. Jen promised Chris that she would lose the weight and attend next year's event. She made an effort to eat healthier, and she worked out nightly after the kids were settled. She said that Chris was impressed with her determination and loved that she was taking his advice. At our family gatherings, he was more affectionate with her and bragged that she had been losing weight and trying to look good for him. I bit my tongue so hard that I tasted blood. About 6 months later, the same week that Jen had reached her personal weight loss goal, she took her kids to our parents' house and quietly filed for divorce. I later found out that Chris had refused to entertain even a conversation about marriage counseling, and he berated Jen in front of the kids, accusing her of having affairs all over town. Despite that, he often publicly joked that she was stuck with him because no one else wants an unskilled, unemployed, 40-something mother of 5. Apparently, his demand of weight loss was the straw that broke the camel's back. Jen's now employed at a job she enjoys, and she spends a ton of quality time with her kids. Chris sees them about 1 weekend a month because his work is too demanding to take care of the younger kids alone more frequently. The older two don't go to his house anymore because they say he leaves them to take care of their younger siblings. This past weekend, Jen fulfilled her initial promise to Chris that she would lose the weight and attend the next black tie event, but not with him. She went with a longtime friend who works for the same organization as Chris. She wore a beautiful gown and she looked stunning. Chris tried to start a conversation with her, during which he puts his arm around her waist and tries to physically pull her away from her date. In front of his colleagues, she updated him on the recent accomplishments of their older children, whom he had not seen or spoken with in more than 2 months. He left shortly afterwards, reportedly red-faced. As it turns out, some people do want a 40-something mom of 5. A successful man who is Jen's high school sweetheart, a good employer who values her ability to multitask, and her children, who are so happy that she finally left their pompous idiot of a father. I frickin' love this malicious compliance, and the fact that Chris regretted it and he got super jealous at the end to the point where his insecurities led him to accuse OP of cheating makes this compliance so much more satisfying. But guys, reading this post for the first time, I actually thought that Chris was taking someone else to the party. But no, the guy just wanted to hide his wife from everyone. And this person comments, the bigger question is, who wants a 40-something overweight man who doesn't know how to treat women, doesn't know how to be a dad, doesn't know how to be a husband, and clearly lacks the barest amount of human compassion to be a decent person? Spoiler, no one. Absolutely savage comment. So this happened several years ago, when my ex and I were going through a heated divorce/custody battle. When we were married, we had a couple of conversations about how rich people hide their assets to avoid paying taxes. Now, I've never had enough assets to do this, but she somehow got the idea that I was, and told an attorney that I was laundering money and hiding income. It was more likely the heat of the moment, as divorce battles often come down to. I couldn't even afford my own attorney, so I represented myself. Now, her lawyer was a total ass. The guy was clearly out to get me. He talked down to me like I didn't deserve to breathe the same air. One day, I get a letter in the mail from him requesting an updated income declarations form and 3 years of financials. It had a long list of things to include. I own a communications tech company that was in a super startup phase back then, and money was super tight. I was trying to get this business off the ground with no financing and finishing my MBA with scholarships and loans. So paying for copies and postage or driving 30 miles to his office meant eating peanut butter and saltines for a week. So I called him to explain my situation. He all but called me a liar and didn't believe I couldn't afford it. Now, I was put off by that, and I said that this was taking time away from business that I needed to handle. To which he replied, and I'll never forget this, "Well, according to your income declarations, you're not that busy. What do you do all day?" He then said if I didn't get these documents, he would consider my previous filings as fraudulent and tell the judge, contact the DA, and also alert the state tax agency and the IRS. He said that he would do his best to ruin my life. At the time, eFax was one of the services my company provides, and at the time, it was relatively unknown. So I asked him if he has a fax machine. The guy said he had a fax, scanner, copier device, and then said what law office doesn't have a fax machine. And suddenly, I got an idea. I say to him, I'll put together and fax whatever I can. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, if you want 3 years of financials, you got it. So I proceeded to scan to PDF every single receipt I could find. McDonald's receipt from 5 years ago, F it, it won't hurt to include it. A CVS receipt that's 3 miles long, perfect. They get the $1 off toothpaste coupons too. I downloaded every bank statement, credit card statement, purchase orders from vendors, and every invoice I sent to clients. I also printed to PDF the entire 3-year accounting journal, monthly balance sheets, cash flow statements, P&Ls, all that stuff. Not only did I PDF 3 years of tax filings, but every single letter I received from the IRS and state tax agency, including the inserts advising me of my rights. It took a while, but I was a few days ahead of the deadline. I made a cover page black background with white lettering. Wherever I could, I included separator pages in all caps, in the biggest, boldest font that would fit on the page. Stuff like 20XX receipts, 20XX taxes, etc. I merged everything into a single 150-page compressed PDF, and then sent the document using my eFax system. Every hour or so, I received a status email saying the fax failed. And I'm thinking, that's weird. Well, they're getting this document. So I changed the system configuration to unlimited retries after failures, to keep redialing until it went through. 2 days later, a lady from his office called and asked me to stop sending the fax, that their fax machine had been printing non-stop. She told me it kept getting paper jams and running out of ink, and they had to keep shutting it off and back on to print. I then explained that her boss told me to send this by the deadline, or else he would contact the DA and IRS. I told her that since I didn't want a call from the DA or IRS, I would keep sending until I get a success confirmation. I suggested they not print until my fax completes, but she didn't like that. She then asked me to email the documents, and I told a little white lie that my email won't allow an attachment that big. That unless her boss put in writing that he agreed to cancel the request or agreed to reimburse me for my cost to print and ship, I said I would continue to fax until they confirm they've received every page. She then put me on hold, and the attorney gets on the line. He said, forget about sending the financials. I said I would need this in writing, so I'll keep sending the fax until he sent that to me. He asked me to stop faxing, and he would send it in writing. And I said, send it in writing first, and then I'll stop. There was a long moment of silence, followed by a click. About 20 minutes later, I received an email from his assistant with an attached signed letter in PDF that I no longer need to provide financials. The letter then threatened to pursue sanctions in court or sue me for interfering with their business. Every time I saw him after that, the lawyer never brought up sanctions, lawsuits, criminal referrals, or financials again. Okay, that was one heck of a compliance, and honestly, I bet to this day that secretary still has nightmares every time she hears a printer. And in my opinion, OP could have made it way worse for the lawyer by not making everything nice and organized like he did. He should have shuffled papers around, left stuff unlabeled before faxing, all that fun stuff. Because the lawyer did say he wanted 3 years of financials. He didn't say it had to be in order. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people episode, where a psycho Karen moves in and she calls the cops on OP because OP's cleaning her house. It's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.